This week in CIST 2611 Network Defensive Countermeasures, we'll look at Chapter 11, Security Policies. In this chapter, the objectives are to create effective user policies. We'll outline effective system administration policies, define effective access controls, and also how to generate effective developmental policies. The policies are the procedures that tell people how to work with technology. Also, basically, the policies is the rules of an organization that says what can be done, what cannot be done, what must be done, and what absolutely must not be done, and the consequences for those actions. So in this case, the policies are written of how to use the technology by people to achieve the objectives for the business. Now, some ways that a policy may not be effective, whether technology might fail in relation to the policy, it really involves people. Where the users manually open an attachment, launching a virus, even though the policy says not to open the attachment. Policy may have requirements that former employees be terminated access to the network, or if those are not followed through with, then the former employees may access the network. Another way that the technology might fail is access to the server, public access to a server. So, as I said, a good user policy outlines specifically how people may use a system and how they may not. And so it says this is what can be done, this is what cannot be done. For your policy to be effective, some areas that must be covered include password policies, internet use, email attachments, software installation and removal, instant messaging, desktop configuration. These are some areas that should be included in your policies. Keep in mind, though, that for a policy to be effective, the policy needs to be quite specific and very clear about the objectives. Some general password policies that would be included in your security policy includes never write down your passwords, never share your passwords with other people for any reason. If your password is compromised, you should contact the administration to change the password, and then trace login attempts on old passwords. In Chapter 8, we discussed the password length, age, and history. Those were the administrative policies as opposed to the policies on how the user should act concerning their passwords. The internet use policies, some of these, the internet access is going to be necessary for businesses. You do have legitimate business use for using the internet. There are also inappropriate uses, and there are some gray areas we'll talk about. Now, some legitimate uses include, your sales staff checking competitors' website to see the products are offered, or business travelers checking weather conditions. Some inappropriate uses, using the web to search for a job, pornographic use, any use that violates local, state, or federal laws. Our use of the web to conduct employees' own business, like an eBay business, for example. Some gray areas, online shopping during the employee's lunch or break time, reading news articles online during lunch or break time, or viewing a humorous website. Those are kind of gray areas. It's going to really be up to the company's internet use policy whether these are allowed. All right, with email attachments, in the email attachment policy, this is one of the ways that a virus can spread. So it's critical you have policies on how to handle attachments. Some recommendations is that you only have attachments being allowed to be open if they meet the following. The attachment was expected. If it was not expected, it has come from a known source, and it appears to be a legitimate business document. Even that second one, where it's not expected, it comes from a known source, is not something that's going to be 100% effective, or really any effective, because you don't know if that known source has been compromised. So they could be, the known source could be compromised and sending out emails with the virus. So I would not even recommend allowing the attachment to be open with the second option here. Now, some reasons you might have a rules for never opening attachment. Maybe that it comes from an unknown source. It has some kind of active code, or it's executable. It's an animation or movie, or just the email doesn't appear legitimate. It may have the signs of a phishing email. You know, sense of urgency, click here now, a lot of misspelling, generic introductions. So those are things that you would write into your email attachment policy. And there are other reasons why you would have also that you may come up with for not opening email attachments. The software installation and removal policies, keep in mind that we will be following the privilege release principle. Is something you should be following, so you want to limit the user's privileges so they cannot install anything without permission that they do not need. Even if they do have permission to install software, the IT department should scan and approve the software first. An optional here is not to provide optical drives for systems that don't need them. So that would cut down on some of the removable media and installation of software. All right, instant message policies. These type of policies could be difficult to enforce because most likelihood violations will not be caught. There are some tools that allow you to monitor instant messaging conversations, allow you to document these conversations. So once again, if it's not necessary in the business, you want to prohibit the use of it. If it is necessary, you want to restrict the use to business issues. And no confidential or private business information should be sent by instant messaging. The desktop personalization policy, this really becomes an issue because of the fact that users want to download graphics. It may be an image, it may be a screensaver, it may be a toolbar add-on. And in those cases, it may actually become a virus you're downloading. So you want to set the rights to configure the desktop. If you block those, if you allow the ability to set the desktop settings, it may also allow them to change network card configuration or Windows firewall. The user policies, best practices for this includes requiring employees to sign off on a user policies when they join the organization. Policies must be clearly defined. Consequences must also be clearly defined. So some examples of consequences is the first incident is a violation result in a verbal warning. Second incident will result in a written warning. And third could be a suspension or termination. They may be more severe punishments, especially if it goes into the legal aspect of this. The reason why you have an employee sign the policy is because then they are signing to say that they have been made aware of the policies. They cannot claim later on that they were not trained on the policies or they did not know about the consequences. Caution must be taken when terminating an employee or expelling a student. You should make sure you clear this through the legal advisors and check with your local and state laws about termination. When we look at system administrator policies, we'll be talking about new employees, leaving employees, change requests, and security breaches. Some things that the new employees should do is document. You should document the granting of access in a log or other forms. These are going to be the procedures they're recommending for hiring new employees. Any request to add an employee should come from the hiring business unit, the human resource department. A request must come from an authorized manager. Request should be signed by IT authority, and then that request should be filed for documentation once everything is complete. Now, these can be applied to not only reviewing the security policies, but also for generating usernames, passwords, access, the privileges they will need to complete their job. These are suggested procedures when an employee leaves a company. You want to disable their account logins for all of their accounts. Make sure all the keys to the facility are returned. Shut off all their accounts for email, internet access, wireless internet, cell phones, any mainframe resources that have accounts that are canceled. And then also search the workstation hard drive for the employee. When we look at change requests, not all change processes may follow these particular steps. Generally, though, it's going to be a manager approves a signed request. IT is going to verify the request can be fulfilled. Any security issues are going to be identified. The IT is going to formulate the plan to implement the change, and then the date and time is set, and the parties are going to be notified of the change. This is when we're dealing with change requests to the policy, and the nature of an IT is going to be the part that's changed. Keep in mind, it's only going to be a matter of time before a company is going to experience some type of security breach. We're going to look at what to do if a virus infection, a denial of service attack happens, or intrusion by a hacker, in the case that your security has been compromised. Now, these are just some of the recommended steps. There will be more options depending on the size of your company, more steps you can follow through with as well. If you have a virus infection, you want to quarantine files through the antivirus software. Once you have those files quarantined, you want to scan and clean each affected machine, keep a log of the incident, bring the machines back online in stages when they have been cleaned. You'll notify organization leaders of incident and the actions that have been taken, and meet with the IT staff to find out ways to prevent future incidents. We have discussed denial of service attacks in earlier chapters and the steps that can be taken to prevent them. Keep in mind, once again, utilize firewalls and IDS software as a way to prevent a denial of service attack. Deny originating IP addresses of the attack access to the network. You can use online resources to find out where the IP address belongs to. You can contact that organization if it's a legit organization, inform them what's happening. Once again, you want to log all activities, inform appropriate leaders. And then after the attack, you want to meet with the IT staff, discuss the attack and what can be done for future attacks. You will see that as a recurring theme. After you successfully recover from attack, you will go in and try to figure out how to stop this from happening again. All right, so these are some general steps if you have an intrusion by a hacker. So you immediately copy all logs of the affected systems. You scan all the systems for Trojan horses, system changes, and so on. Document everything, change all affected passwords, inform appropriate leaders, and then once again, meet with the IT staff. How can we stop this from happening again? There must be a balance between security and the availability of users to do their job, have access to the resources to do their jobs. So a complete lockdown of resources is not practical. On the other hand, the unfettered access is also not feasible. So you have to find a balance between convenience and security. Now, one of the ways that can help is the concept of least privilege. This is something that should be followed, but keep in mind there's always going to be trade-offs on this balance. So when we look at defining developmental policies, if possible, you want your software development within the company. You want to make sure that you check all your code for Trojan horses and other malware. All buffers must have error handling, which prevents buffer overruns. You want to follow secure communication guidelines. Document code that opens ports and inform the IT security staff of the expected behavior. And also, your vendors must disclose in writing the known security flaws of their software. Now, in the programming, so if you're, for example, web applications and software, that's something that's beyond the scope of this text. So just keep in mind, though, that that is something that if your company is able to develop the software internally, it is better than going out and outsourcing it or buying software. So to summarize this chapter, your policies must be clear and specific policies, and they're coupled with technology to secure your network. So really what policies are the rules that people use to guide people to use the technology to secure your systems, your organization. So your policies must cover how new employees, outgoing employees, access control, emergency response procedures, application to web code security, all aspects of use of the company's technology, instant messaging, web use, and then also the consequences must be clearly outlined for not following the policy. Once again, the policy states that what can be done, what cannot be done, what must happen, what must not happen, and then the consequences for those actions.